Hello and welcome back to the Football for Kids podcast. I hope that you've had a wonderful summer and that if you're playing for a football team, that your season has got off to a happy start. Remember, the most important thing about playing football is enjoying it. A quick message before we get into the episode. Before the summer, I had some school visits booked in to do some live podcasts. But I needed to reschedule them because I injured my foot. Don't worry though, I didn't injure my foot by dropping Jack Grealish's wallet on it. It was something much more boring than that. Anyway, I'm trying to rebook those school visits in. If your school hasn't had a response from me or a new date, it's because their email has disappeared from my Football for Kids email address inbox. Maybe I said the wrong Harry Potter spell. If your school still wants a visit and they've not received an email from me over the last couple of weeks, then please ask them to get back in touch. And I will do my best to find a new date so I can come to your school and do a live Football for Kids podcast for your assembly. Right, now that's out the way, let's get on with this episode. To the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. In this episode, we're going to be doing a part 2 on the goal scoring machine, Erling Haaland. The first ever episode on Erling Haaland was called Haaland the Goal Machine, and it was the 9th episode that I made on the podcast just a couple of years ago. So I think it's only right we do a part 2 on Erling Haaland as he's been scoring goals everywhere he's gone. With no further ado, let's get on with Haaland the Goal Machine part 2. We ended the last episode in 2022 with what Haaland could go on to achieve as a Manchester City player. When that episode was released, Haaland hadn't long been at the club. I ended that episode by saying that footballing experts had predicted that Haaland could go on to score 40 goals for Manchester City in his opening season. Now, there were lots of people who thought they were talking rubbish, but I believed them. He scored a whopping great 36 goals in the Premier League in his first season for Manchester City. In fact, he broke a 94-year record for the club that season when he scored 52 incredible goals across all competitions. He also finished as the Champions League top striker, scoring 12 in the European competition, and he grabbed 6 hat-tricks for the blue side of Manchester across all competitions. 4 of those came in the league, with another in the FA Cup quarter-final against Burnley, and his final match ball of the 2022-23 season came after a 5-goal stint in the round of 16 of the Champions League. In that season, he also broke a Manchester City record of scoring in the most consecutive games when he scored in every game for 10 games in a row. He also broke the City record for any player by scoring the most goals at home and the most goals away in one season than any other City player in the history of the club. Okay, last one, because this is getting out of hand. He also broke the record for the most Premier League hat-tricks, scoring more hat-tricks than any other City player in history, with 4 unbelievable ones. It's fair to say Haaland was worth every penny that City spent on him, and he cost somewhere around £55 million, which in the grand scheme of things is a bit of a bargain. City, of course, went on to win the Premier League that season, and it's fair to say without Erling Haaland, you wonder whether they would have been able to do it. In the following season, and in the opening game, Haaland kicked things off with how he left them in the last season. City went away in their black and red diagonal striped kits to Burnley, and Haaland scored a brace. I mean, of course he did. This is Erling Haaland. A few games later, Manchester City were at home to Fulham. City battered them 5-1, and Haaland scored his 7th hat-trick for the club in only his 2nd season. Some strikers go half a decade at a club without scoring a hat-trick. Haaland had now scored 7 of them in 1 season and a few games. When he did this, he also became the fastest player in Premier League history to be involved in 50 Premier League goals. So that's either scoring or assisting. That is quite significant. It wasn't too long after this that at the famous Ballon d'Or award ceremony, Erling Haaland was awarded a very special award called the Gerd Müller Award, which is given to the player to score the most goals for both their club and their country in 1 season. After winning that award, he went on to score more goals, and then more goals, and you guessed it, more goals. He became the fastest individual player to actually score 50 goals in the history of the Premier League. However, the goal scoring would come to a halt when Haaland picked up a foot injury, which would see him away from a football pitch for over 2 months. That's tough for any player, never mind one who was on fire and scoring goals in pretty much every match he played in. Haaland did what he needed to do. He was dedicated, he was disciplined, and he listened to the doctor's orders. He got himself fit and strong again, and he returned with a bang. City played Fulham away this time, and Haaland, well, of course he scored. And he then joined Harry Kane on the list of scoring against every single team that he'd played against in the Premier League. The week after, he went on to score 5 goals against Luton in a game that finished 6-2 to City. This was the 2nd time he had scored 5 goals in 1 match for Manchester City, and he made history by becoming the only City player to have ever done this on 2 separate occasions. Although he was out for a couple of months with injury, that season he still scored 27 Premier League goals, and once again he won the Golden Boot. 2 months out, that is pretty impressive stuff. But here we are, in the 2024-25 season, and to say Haaland is on fire would be a bit of an understatement. He's already scored yet another hat-trick. This time, it was against poor old Ipswich Town, who have had a right hard time at the start of the season. He's already the Premier League top goal scorer for this season so far, and he's already broken the record for the most goals scored by a City player in 3 opening seasons than any other player has in the history of the Premier League. In 2022, I called the episode Haaland the Goal Machine, and I think it's fair to say he's lived up to that name. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode on Erling Haaland Part 2 and hearing about his truly amazing achievements, and I hope that you're inspired by him, and I really hope that you can take a bit of that and put it into your own football. So remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.